So this video today is for anyone just getting into no code. I'm going to be telling you how I created the Unicorn Factory without knowing how to code and hopefully rope you into starting your own no code business with the tools that I'm going to be talking about. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Connor, and on this channel I help people who cannot code build online businesses with no code tools. Now, if this is your first time here, then this is going to be the perfect video for you, because in this video I'm going to give you an overview of what no code is about and where you should get started if you want to explore it further. Now, before we get into it, if you are thinking about setting up an online business or a side hustle, but you are stuck because you can't code and you don't have access to the type of funding that you're going to need in order to hire developers, then quickly subscribe to the channel. I make a whole bunch of these videos that will hopefully help you get your business on the way using these tools. But without further ado, let's just dive straight into the first point, which is going over what no-code tools are, how it's absolutely changing the game for people wanting to set up online businesses, and how I set up the Unicorn Factory, which is New Zealand's largest freelancer marketplace, without having a clue how to code. So no-code tools are tools or software that was developed to help people who don't come from a coding background to visually build websites, automate workflows, build databases, and basically do a whole bunch of things that you would otherwise require developers for. Now, when I graduated from university about 6 years ago, I wanted to go out and start my own startup. But one of the biggest barriers that I had, and this is also a barrier that a lot of other non-coders have, is that unless you have access to a lot of funding or you can code yourself, you really don't have a lot of other opportunities to really get your startup off the ground. So some advice that I got when I was trying to find ways to get my platform up and running was to basically get to the point where I could prove to investors that I had enough traction, and I could do that by building a list of potential customers, even making pre-sales. And as soon as I was at the point where I really had a good business case, I could just go and raise money from those investors, hire developers, and then get those developers to build that platform for me. Now, in theory, that sounds like a pretty straightforward plan, but anyone who has gone through that experience of trying to raise money before will know that it's actually not that easy at all. Especially in New Zealand, where I'm from, there are just not that many opportunities and people who are actually out there investing in early stage businesses. There are definitely some, but just not that many relative to the amount of people starting businesses in New Zealand. And so oftentimes you find yourself in a situation where over time you just don't see the kind of results that you want, and that oftentimes leads to your startup idea dying. So another industry that had a very similar problem to what we have in the software space is commerce. So oftentimes if you want to start a store, you would have to buy all of the inventory, you would have to pay for your lease, you would have to have staff who would be available, and that again required a huge cash outlay and wasn't really possible for anyone who didn't have that cash lying around or who didn't have access to the type of people who could invest in that type of business. The game in the commerce space changed though when Shopify came along and really democratized people setting up online stores. So even though the barrier to entry didn't completely come down because you still needed to know a little bit about setting up online stores, it really made it a lot more accessible for people who didn't have that type of cash to just basically jump online, set up a store, and then to really dive into, selling different types of products online. Now, no-code tools have done the exact same thing for the software space. So after a few failed attempts at setting up a startup with some friends, I decided to jump into the freelancing world to make a little bit of money, and I helped businesses with their Facebook advertising and a whole bunch of other marketing campaigns. So one of the key things that I had to learn when I started helping businesses with their Facebook advertising and their marketing campaigns was to learn how to build landing pages that would allow me to drive traffic to that website. Now, I tried to learn how to code multiple times, never really stuck. I also tried to have a little look at how WordPress works, and that also had quite a high learning curve. But luckily, one day I discovered a tool called Webflow, which completely changed my life. Now, Webflow is a website building tool similar to Shopify or Squarespace, but with the main difference being that instead of randomly dragging and dropping together different elements on a canvas, you're actually visually writing code. And one of the things that completely sold it to me was that after I was done building out my sites inside of Webflow, I could actually export the code and hand it over to developers, and then they could build on top of what I had visually coded for them. Now, as someone who had been trying to learn how to code so that I could contribute to the actual product development lifecycle, discovering a tool like Webflow and seeing how I could contribute to the build of an app or a product was absolutely game changing. And from that moment, I really just started to dive deep into how Webflow works. So one of the main reasons why Webflow was built in the first place was to empower designers who would otherwise have to hand over their designs to developers to actually just build the websites themselves. So at the time, the most common use cases of Webflow was basically to build marketing sites or to develop really nice looking animated pages that were developed directly by the designers. But the deeper I dived into Webflow, the more I started to realize that you could actually do so much more with it than just building marketing sites, because you were actually following the traditional rules of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which are the coding languages that I use to build the front end of websites. And as soon as I started to dive into it further and seeing how you can use the Webflow CMS to basically build template pages, I discovered that there was an opportunity for me to start working on an idea that I always kind of wanted to work on, which was the Unicorn Factory. So the idea for the Unicorn Factory was pretty straightforward. At the time, most of the work that I was getting from working in a co-working space in Wellington, and a lot of the work would be referred to me from people who were actually in the space. And I kind of realized that there would probably be an opportunity to help people who are also freelancing but did not work from co-working spaces connect with local businesses who might needed their help. So at the time, it seemed like a very straightforward project to me. It was just simply building a very simple directory in Webflow, which I could definitely do with the skills that I had already acquired at the time. And then all I needed to do is just find a few people who were freelancing and were keen to be on the website, and then just start promoting it to some of the businesses in the co-working space. So it took me about 2 days to build the very first version of the Unicorn Factory. I also went out and I roped in a bunch of friends for joining the site, because I only had 2 real freelancers at the time who wanted to join the site, and I thought it would be a bit strange to launch a directory with 2 people in it. So luckily a few of my friends volunteered to be on there, even though they had full-time jobs and no real interest in being freelancers. But you know, you got to start somehow. Now, in order to spread the word about what I was doing, I basically told people in the co-working space what I was working on, which really helped with just getting the first few official clients to use the site. And then I also posted it in a Facebook group that then also really started to help build awareness with other freelancers who started signing up to the site then. So at the time, I didn't have grandiose ambitions for the Unicorn Factory. For me, it was just a fun little side project to do. People were getting work through the site, and also it was a fun little project to work on. But over time, more and more freelancers started signing up, more and more businesses started joining, and it started getting a bit tedious managing all of that, especially considering that I was doing it all for free. So the most tedious thing about managing the Unicorn Factory at the time was that I had to do everything manually, meaning that if, for example, a freelancer wanted to sign up, I had to manually go through the process of setting up their profile on Webflow. If a client wanted to reach out to a freelancer, I had to manually forward on all of the information about the client's project to the freelancer, and it just started to add up as the platform started to grow. Luckily, I discovered the next tool called Zapier, which was another absolute game changer, because it allowed me to take all of these manual processes and automate them. Now, what Zapier does is it allows you to connect a bunch of apps to each other and to basically automate the workflows that send different informations between those different tools. Now, again, the advantage of Zapier is that it is designed for people who cannot code to basically replicate the workflows that would otherwise have to be set up by a backend developer. So the first workflow that I set up for the Unicorn Factory was the lead generation workflow that I have a video about on this channel, where I automatically forwarded on all of the information that a client would submit on a freelancer's profile page to that freelancer by email. So as soon as I had set up that workflow, I discovered the endless possibilities of using Zapier to pretty much automate all of these different things that I was otherwise doing manually. Not just was I using Zapier for the Unicorn Factory, I was using it for absolutely everything, my freelancing business, even in my personal life. And the greatest thing about Zapier was that it really allowed me to now scale up the amount of people that I could have on the Unicorn Factory, the amount of clients that I could refer to freelancers, and that is when things really started to kick off for the Unicorn Factory. One thing that I started to discover pretty early on as it started to grow was that I needed to find a more effective way to organize all of the information that I had about different freelancers, different clients, and all the different inquiries that would come in, which is when I discovered the third tool, which is Airtable. So Airtable is a database that is probably quite similar to Google Sheets in a lot of ways, with the main exception that it is really, really good for managing large amounts of data. So for example, if you're using Google Sheet and you start adding a lot of rows in there, things can get pretty messy pretty fast. But Airtable is just kind of set up to be nice and visual. It doesn't require you to know how to code, and it's really good to integrate with tools like Zapier that will then allow you to send that data that sits inside of Airtable to Webflow. So with those free tools, I was able to grow the Unicorn Factory to the point where we have now got over 550 freelancers on the site. We also have worked with over 3,000 businesses in New Zealand, and it's evolved now into being one of the largest freelancing marketplaces in New Zealand. I have also expanded the Unicorn Factory into Canada. I'm still in the very early days of it, but I'm basically going through the exact same process that I went through in New Zealand in Canada. So throughout me building the Unicorn Factory, I wasn't really openly talking to people about how I was building it. I kind of thought it was like a weird little niche thing that not a lot of people cared about. Also, I had my forums that I participate in, for example, the Webflow forum. There were also a few little niche YouTube channels that had started that would talk about things like Zapier or Airtable. But the game absolutely changed for me when I was invited to speak at the NoCo conference in San Francisco in November 2019. So the NoCo conference was put on by Webflow, and they basically invited me to come over to San Francisco and tell people how I built the Unicorn Factory with Webflow, Airtable, and Zapier. And so I went and whipped up a little presentation, flew over to San Francisco, and did the talk. So the NoCo conference was fantastic for multiple reasons, but probably the most exciting part about it was that I got to meet a whole bunch of people who were using the same tools that I was to build their own little online businesses. They had all started off for the exact same reason that I had, which is they just didn't know how to code and they wanted to get their business idea off the ground. The more time I spent talking to them, the more I realized that this problem was not a problem that just developed overnight. Not knowing how to code and not being able to get your own online business up and running is something that is incredibly frustrating, and I think that these tools here have now become a solution to that problem. That is why I decided that I wanted to share a bit about how I built the Unicorn Factory with the wider community, with people who were not able to attend the NoCo conference. So I whipped up the presentation and I put it online. Now, ever since I put that presentation online, a whole bunch of people reached out to me telling me that they started an online business off the back of watching that presentation, and that is absolutely fantastic because that was the main reason why I wanted to share it with people. Now, I decided in about October last year that I wanted to go a bit further with the type of help that I want to give people, so I started this YouTube channel here where I make a whole bunch of tutorials on how you can build certain types of things. I show people behind the scenes of the Unicorn Factory and show you how I use different types of tools to automate certain workflows to really help people take their business ideas to the next level. So I make a range of tutorials. Some are quite advanced, some are for people just getting into it, and so what I want to do now is tell you where you should get started depending on where you are in your no-code journey. So if this is the first time that you've heard about no-code, you don't know what Webflow is, you don't really know what Zapier is, and you've just kind of stumbled into this video, then I recommend actually watching my How to Build a Marketplace Without Code tutorial, which is on my website. It's 45 minutes and it will give you a high-level overview of how I built the Unicorn Factory, the different tools that I use, the different workflows that I set up, and it will give you a really good idea of how the different tools work together and where you can get started. Now, if you have already been doing your research into no-code, you have an idea of what all the different tools do, but you're not quite sure where to get started, then I recommend checking out my playlist on my YouTube channel called Start Here, where I basically show you an intro to Webflow, Zapier. I also show you how it's possible to build certain types of platforms like YouTube or Fiverr, and that will really help you make that first step into building your online platform. If on the other hand, you've already made your start and you've already got the basic version of your marketplace up and running and you're looking for new ways to take things to the next level, then check out my pro tutorials playlist where I show you how I set up certain things in the Unicorn Factory. I also dive deeper into different tools that are out there that allow you to solve some very specific use cases, and that will really allow you to take things to the next level. Now, before you go out there, I want to also quickly tell you what you should expect in terms of how long it should take you to get comfortable with all the different tools and to get to the point where you can set up your own online business with no-code tools. Now, as soon as you dive into the no-code world, you are going to stumble into tutorials where people are going to basically tell you how they built something like Airbnb within 5 minutes. But I want to set the expectation straight from the outset that a lot of these people who build these things as fast as that actually have a lot of experience in using all the tools, and you will definitely not be in a position where you'll be able to spin something up as fast as that. Now, in order for you to get comfortable with Webflow and you just go through the process of learning it all yourself, I'll probably say sticking to it for a solid 3 months will put you into a position where you can probably build the entire front end of your online business. Now, I would focus my energy on Webflow at the very beginning because that is definitely the tool that has the biggest learning curve, but it also is the tool that will have the biggest impact on you actually getting your platform up and running. And Webflow also has a fantastic resource called Webflow University, where they have a bunch of tutorials for free where you can learn how to rebuild certain types of websites. Now, if you are looking for a great project to get started with, I would recommend trying to set up a landing page for your startup idea where you can then go ahead and connect forms to it and basically practice setting up some workflows with Zapier and Airtable. As soon as you've got the hang of Webflow, then I would just focus on learning the basics of Zapier. And honestly, Zapier is not that difficult to learn. They have a very nice, simple to use user interface. So even if you don't know how APIs work, it will still be easy to kind of connect them all to each other. And again, I've got some tutorials on this channel that will really help you get your first Zap set up. Then again, Airtable is a pretty easy to learn tool. Again, it's all about how to structure your databases properly. So as soon as you learn how Webflow works and you learn how the Webflow CMS works, then setting up your database inside of Airtable will also be pretty straightforward because you'll know exactly what fields you need to set up. All up, I'd say if you're going to go through the process of learning this all yourself, give yourself 4 to 5 months and you will honestly change your life knowing how Webflow, Airtable, and Zapier works. You'll be in a position where you will understand how they all work together and you'll be able to solve some really unique use cases, and you'll be able to basically build an online platform that will allow you to make money on the side or will allow you to get your actual business idea up and running. Now, if you don't have this kind of time and you need to get something up and running ASAP, then I also have some coaching programs on my website that you can check out. First of all, if you just want to learn the basics a lot faster, I am about to launch a course where I show you how to set up your own landing page, connect it to Airtable and Zapier, and I'll basically give you a bunch of homework that will basically get you to the point where you can launch a pre-launch site for your startup in a few weeks. If on the other hand you want to dive straight into building a marketplace or an online directory with no-code tools like Webflow, Airtable, and Zapier, then I also have a program called the MVMP program, which is a little bit of a hybrid of an online course and one-on-one coaching where I basically help you get your online business set up. So the MVMP program is definitely more for people who are more serious about using no-code tools to set up their startup, to build the basic version of it and to get it to market where they can then either go ahead and raise money or even just get it to the point where it's generating enough revenue that you can hire people to help you with it. So if that is you, then jump on over to the website. I'll leave a link to both the courses and the coaching program in the description down below, and I'll be happy to help you out with that too. Alright, so I'm going to wrap it up here. I just wanted to finish off by saying that no-code tools have absolutely changed my life. When I think back as to where I was before I discovered these tools, it was just so hard for me as an ideas person to really get my business up and running without hiring people who could help me build it. Now, I'm pretty confident that if you are in a position right now where you want to get your own business up and running, but the biggest barrier to getting started is not being able to code and not being able to afford to hire developers to build it for you, then this is going to be for you. So I've been lucky enough to meet some amazing founders who don't come from a technical background who have managed to build their online marketplaces or their online directories with these tools, and they are now solving really key issues that they have in their community. And if you want to be someone who solves issues in your community, then this might just be the path to make it happen. Either way, thank you very much for sticking around. I really appreciate you watching the whole video. Again, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. Other than that, I hope you're as pumped about this all as I am. So I'll see you back here for the next video.